They say don't mess with a man's car, especially when that man is a national racing champion. But HOA Karen didn't care. She towed my custom-built race car from my own driveway, claiming it was an eyesore that didn't belong in her picture-perfect neighborhood. What she didn't know was that she had just messed with the wrong engine. She thought I was just some greasy gearhead. But when the headlines hit, when the sponsors rolled in, and when the media showed up to cover my revenge, Karen's smug smile stalled faster than her logic. And in the end, I didn't just get my car back. I made her HOA choke on its own rules. Welcome to the HOA Discover channel. If you find out this story interesting, hit the like button, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's get back to the story. When peace and pride park on the same driveway, expect trouble to knock. After years of high-speed circuits, roaring engines, and standing on podiums drenched in champagne, I was ready for a bit of quiet. The kind of quiet where the only thing I'd hear in the morning was the chirping of birds, not the countdown of a race official. So, I bought a home in a gated, upper-middle-class neighborhood tucked just outside the city. Everything about it screamed calm. The tree-lined streets, the identical manicured lawns, even the soft wind chimes hanging from the porches. It was exactly the opposite of my adrenaline-fueled lifestyle. And that was the point. The moving truck arrived early in the morning, loaded with boxes labeled gearboxes, spare rims, and tool set do not drop. My neighbors peeked from their windows, probably expecting a young family or a retired couple. Instead, out stepped a man in oil-stained jeans, a snug racing tee, and a worn-out cap with my national championship logo stitched into it. Me. I nodded politely, waved even, but their expressions didn't change. Their smiles were tight. Their eyes stayed narrow. Then came the centerpiece, my race car. It rolled off the flatbed gently, glinting in the sun, a custom-built GT3 machine, matte black with scarlet accents, low to the ground, fierce even when idle. It wasn't just a car. It was an extension of me. Years of design, tuning, blood, and sweat. A symbol of speed, resilience, and victory. I parked it neatly in my driveway, right beside my modest everyday SUV, and covered it with a weatherproof, form-fitting tarp that made its silhouette look like a sleeping beast. That's when I saw her. Across the street, standing on her pristine white porch with a clipboard in hand, wearing pressed khakis and a floral blouse, Karen. I didn't know her name yet, but I could tell by the way she squinted at my car like it was a crime scene that she was going to be that neighbor. She didn't wave back. Instead, she scribbled something on her clipboard and walked inside. I shrugged it off. Maybe she was just one of those keep it clean types. I respected that to a point. I spent the rest of the day unpacking boxes, setting up my garage, and greeting the few neighbors who actually came over. One guy even asked for a selfie with me, recognizing me from a recent championship. Didn't expect you to live here, he laughed. Wait till the HOA sees that monster in your driveway, though. That line stuck with me. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the rows of identical rooftops, I sat on my porch sipping a cold drink. I noticed Karen again, now walking the sidewalk with a poodle on a retractable leash. She made a wide loop to avoid passing directly in front of my house. Her eyes glanced at the car cover again, this time with visible disdain. I figured maybe she just didn't like cars. That was fine. Not everyone did. But I could feel it brewing already, the tension. The kind of quiet hostility that wasn't loud, but sharp. The kind that didn't shout at you but worked behind closed doors and under paper trails. Sure enough, the next morning I found it. A bright yellow notice folded neatly and wedged into my mailbox. It read, Violation, Unauthorized Vehicle Storage, HOA Rule 14b. No commercial, recreational, or modified vehicles may be stored in driveways for over 24 hours. Attached to it was a photo of my car from the previous day, from across the street. From Karen's porch. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. I wasn't just some guy who bought a flashy toy and parked it like a trophy. I was a licensed, professional national racing champion. That car wasn't for show. It was my livelihood, my identity, my art. I had the permits. I had the insurance. I had even cleared local regulations before I moved in. But none of that mattered to Karen. To her, it was an eyesore. To me, it was a battle flag. She thought I was just another rule-breaking homeowner. What she didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that I've faced down rival teams, corporate politics, and life-threatening crashes. If she thought a few typed notices and cold stares were going to intimidate me, she had no idea what gear I was built in. As I reread the violation letter and looked across the street at Karen watering her roses like nothing had happened, I felt it deep in my gut, that rumble I usually feel before a big race. Not fear, not anger, fuel. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. This was the warm-up lap. And Karen had just waved the green flag. In racing, flags warn you. In neighborhoods, it's paperwork. Exactly 6 days after I moved in, the envelope came. No return address, but the emblem on the top left corner said it all. The HOA crest, a little blue house surrounded by laurel leaves, printed with the smug authority of people who think they run the world because they manage lawns. Inside was a single-page letter, polite in tone, but aggressive in spirit. The kind that pretends to gently inform you while stabbing your peace of mind. Subject: HOA violation notice, Rule 14B. Date: stamped in red. Violation: unauthorized vehicle storage. Details: you are in violation of community aesthetic standards. No commercial, recreational, or modified vehicles may be parked in visible residential driveways for over 24 hours. Your vehicle, described as a racing car, falls under this restriction. You have 72 hours from the date of this notice to remove the vehicle, or it may be subject to towing at your expense. There was even a photo paperclipped to the letter, my car, under the fitted black cover, sitting silently in my driveway. Shot from across the street. Probably with a zoom lens. Probably by Karen. I stared at the letter for a good 2 minutes. Not out of fear, but disbelief. This wasn't just bureaucracy. This was personal. Karen had declared war over a vehicle she hadn't even seen uncovered. Her issue wasn't about noise or safety or traffic. It was about control. I took a deep breath, walked into my home office, and opened the file cabinet that held everything from racing licenses to sponsorship contracts. I pulled out a folder labeled Local Compliance because I'd done my homework before moving in. Inside were printed copies of city ordinances, garage blueprints I'd submitted to the zoning office, and my racing credentials from the National Grand Prix Association. Within the hour, I drafted my response, calm, professional, but firm. To whom it may concern. I received a violation letter dated, insert date, claiming that my vehicle violates HOA Rule 14B. I am writing to respectfully challenge this claim on the following grounds. The vehicle in question is legally registered, fully insured, and currently covered with a regulation-grade weather tarp. The vehicle is not commercial, recreational, nor abandoned. It is part of my profession as a licensed national racing competitor. According to City Code Section ____, vehicles such as mine, owned and operated as part of a professional trade, are exempt from such restrictions if they are not actively disrupting public peace, safety, or infrastructure. Attached: registration, insurance, City Code excerpt, and garage remodel permits. Kindly consider this an official appeal of the violation. I expect a formal review within the HOA's mandated 5-day response period. Regards. My name. I made 3 copies. 1 for the HOA mailbox, 1 for my records, and 1 I hand-delivered, straight to Karen's door. She opened the door halfway, still wearing her gardening gloves, her poodle yapping at her ankles.
"Hi," I said.
Figured I'd deliver this directly. Response to the violation letter. She took it slowly, eyeing me with the expression of someone who just found tire marks on their tulips. "I assume you'll be moving the car?" she said flatly. "I assume you'll be reviewing the law," I said with a smile. Her mouth twitched. A flicker of frustration, masked behind polite civility. "We'll see what the board decides." I gave a friendly nod and walked away. But I knew she wasn't finished. The next day, I got a second letter. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was handwritten, stuffed under my door. No envelope, no header, just ink on lined paper like a high school drama note. "You're ruining the neighborhood's image. Nobody wants to live next to a racetrack. This isn't a pit stop, it's a home. Be considerate and take your engine junk elsewhere. That was all the confirmation I needed. It wasn't the board coming after me. It was Karen. She was the board, or at least she controlled enough of it to act like a tyrant in yoga pants. She was making it personal, and I knew where this was heading. I started prepping. I installed a set of low-profile security cameras. Not just for safety, for evidence. I didn't trust Karen not to escalate. I also upgraded the motion-triggered lights around the driveway and set alerts for anyone who stepped onto my property line. And finally, I documented everything. Every notice, every visit, every conversation. Because while Karen was playing HOA politics, I was building a case. Still, the 72-hour deadline loomed. The evening before it expired, I was polishing the car's hood inside my garage when I saw her standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, watching my every move. She wanted me to fold, to move the car and admit defeat. But I didn't. I stood there, staring back. And she smirked, like a villain who thinks they've already won. That's when I knew. She was going to do it. She was going to tow my car. And she had no idea she was about to make the biggest mistake of her HOA career. To some, it was a car. To me, it was everything. And in one morning, it was gone. It started like any other morning. The sun had just crept over the rooftops, birds were chirping, and the smell of freshly cut grass filled the air. I was halfway through my morning routine, protein shake in hand, engine tuning checklist laid out, when I noticed something was wrong. Very wrong. I stepped out onto my porch and froze. The driveway was empty. Completely, unnaturally empty. My SUV was parked under the carport, but my race car, the pride of my career, my national champion, custom-engineered masterpiece, was gone. No tire marks, no debris, no damage. Just a clean void where my car had been, like it had never existed. Like someone had erased part of my identity. I blinked. Once.
Twice.
Then the realization hit. She did it. Karen towed my car. Panic flared in my chest, but it wasn't the frantic, clueless kind. It was the kind racers get just before the last lap, focused, burning, controlled. I sprinted back inside, grabbed my phone, and called the HOA's emergency line. No answer. Called again. Still nothing. I flipped through the HOA handbook and found a number for a contracted towing service listed in the back. I dialed. It rang once. Then a tired-sounding man answered. Jasper's Towing. How can I help you? I took a deep breath. Hi, I'm calling to ask if a matte black GT3 class vehicle was towed this morning from my address. There was a pause. Typing. Yes, sir. That vehicle was towed at 5:43 a.m. Order placed by, pause again. Karen Whitmore, acting on behalf of the HOA. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I felt heat rise up the back of my neck, but I stayed calm. Where is it now? In our impound lot. You'll need to bring ID and proof of ownership. Towing fee is $350. Storage starts in 6 hours. I thanked him and hung up. For a full 60 seconds, I just stood there in my living room, staring at the phone in my hand. My thoughts swirled. My heart pounded like I was sitting in a race car at the start line. This wasn't just a violation of property. This was theft. Premeditated, targeted theft, disguised behind a rule book. I walked back outside and scanned the street. And there she was. Karen, standing across the street in her robe, coffee mug in hand, that smug, self-satisfied grin stretching across her face like a cracked mask. She didn't say anything, didn't need to. Her raised eyebrows said it all. I warned you. I told you to move it. I wanted to speak, to call her out, but I bit my tongue. Not out of fear, but strategy. She thought she had won, but she didn't know who I was. Not really. She didn't know she'd just towed the car of a national racing champion, a car that had appeared on the cover of 3 magazines, had been sponsored by world-famous brands, had survived a 200 miles per hour crash, and lived to race again. A car with more value, financially and sentimentally, than every minivan in the neighborhood combined. And she treated it like an abandoned jalopy. I went inside, grabbed the car's title, insurance papers, racing license, and headed to the impound. On the drive there, every second felt like another piston firing in my mind. This wasn't just about getting my car back anymore. This was war. And war has rules I was about to turn against her. When I arrived at the impound lot, the man behind the desk recognized me almost instantly. "Wade, aren't you?" "Yeah," I said, flashing my ID. "That's my car in the back." He laughed nervously. "We were wondering what the hell kind of HOA has the guts to tow a GT3 class race car. You're a legend, man. You want us to help get it out clean?"
Please.
"Let's roll her out gently." They escorted me to the back, where I found her, my car, behind a chain-link fence, still covered, thankfully untouched. Seeing her there, tucked between a rusted Ford and a broken-down van, felt like watching a lion in a cage. But even lions wait before they roar. I paid the ridiculous fine for now, and arranged for a flatbed to bring her back, this time straight into my garage where no HOA could reach. But the moment she touched down on my driveway again, I started making moves. First, I called my lawyer. Then I called my sponsors. Finally, I called my team's media rep. "I need a story pushed," I said. "Title it, National Champion's Car Towed by HOA Over Aesthetic Rules." Use that phrase exactly. Let's see if we can get a few local journalists to bite. They didn't just bite. They swarmed. But that's for the next chapter. Because the moment I saw Karen's face when my car rolled back in later that evening, cameras flashing, neighbors crowding around, I knew something she didn't. She'd started a fight in a cul-de-sac. I was bringing a whole racetrack.
She thought she was silencing me.
Instead, she put me on stage. The moment I stepped back into my garage with my car safely returned, still intact, still covered in a thin layer of dust from the impound lot, I felt it. That slow burn behind the chest. The kind that doesn't scream, doesn't shout, but plans. Karen had crossed the line. But I wasn't going to meet her with petty retaliation. I was going to do what I did best, make a spectacle. And when you're a racing champion with a media team, millions of fans, and sponsors itching for publicity, that spectacle becomes inevitable. I didn't yell. I didn't knock on Karen's door. Instead, I walked into my home office, fired up the desktop, and called my racing team's communications director. "Eli," I said, "you want to blow up the internet?" He chuckled. "What did you do this time?" "Didn't do anything. HOA towed my car. Claimed it was an eyesore." Dead silence. "Then, are they insane? You're on a national circuit."
Exactly.
"I want this story out. I want our sponsors in. I want to burn them politely." Eli didn't need further convincing. Within an hour, he had the headline ready. National Racing Champion's $300,000 GT3 car towed by HOA over neighborhood aesthetic. We attached photos, my car at the impound lot, the original HOA violation letter, and a shot of me in full racing gear at a recent Grand Prix, holding the trophy, grinning under the confetti. By morning, the post was live on our official website and social media pages, Instagram, X, Twitter, Facebook, even TikTok. I thought it might get some traction with racing fans. It exploded. Local news stations picked it up within hours. The Evening Chronicle ran the headline, "Champion driver's race car declared nuisance by HOA, sparks outrage." An auto journalist from Torque Daily reached out for an exclusive interview. A top YouTube car vlogger, 5 million subscribers strong, DM'd me and asked if he could come film a feature. I agreed. And I made sure the shoot happened right in my driveway. By noon that Saturday, his crew arrived in a matte black van, camera gear in hand, gimbals and drones ready. They set up as I peeled back the tarp and revealed my car to a small but growing crowd of curious neighbors, some I'd never even met before. The kids gathered first, their eyes wide as dinner plates. Then came the teens with phones out. Then came the dads who whispered, "Is that the real thing?" Like they were in the presence of royalty. I didn't have to say a word. The car said it all. Sleek, low, fierce, a machine of triumph. A car that had crossed finish lines at 200 miles per hour. The YouTuber, Jack from Full Throttle TV, filmed everything. Me polishing the car, Me talking about how it had been wrongfully towed. Me lifting the trophy next to it while the camera slowly panned to the quiet, trembling street behind me. And then, Karen appeared. She came marching down the sidewalk, clutching a binder, her lips tight, her face pale with anger and embarrassment. She stopped at the edge of my property and scowled at the camera crew. "You can't film here. This is private property. This is a violation of HOA. Jack cut her off, cheerfully. "Ma'am, we're filming on private property. This driveway belongs to the homeowner. You're welcome to leave the frame if you don't want to be seen." Karen looked around and realized she was outnumbered. Residents, kids, reporters, all watching her. All silently waiting to see what she'd do. And for the first time since I moved in, Karen backed away. No argument. No clipboard. Just a retreat, slow, stiff, and silent. Later that afternoon, Full Throttle TV uploaded the video with the title, "HOA tows National Champs race car. Watch his epic response." Within 24 hours, it had over 2 million views. People were furious on my behalf. The comments lit up. Karen just messed with a literal legend. What was she thinking? HOAs are getting out of hand. That car is art. This man is a hero. And then the phone calls started. Sponsors saw the story and wanted in. One offered to fund a full community race day event just to show support. A racing school asked if I'd be willing to host a fan meetup in front of my house. A local news anchor invited me for a live interview. Suddenly, this wasn't just a personal issue. This was national, viral, political, symbolic. Karen's precious little kingdom of conformity had been turned into a media circus. Her HOA board started panicking. I knew it from the sudden HOA-wide email blast I received that night. "Dear residents, please note that outside filming, commercial media activity, and vehicle displays must be approved by the HOA board moving forward." It reeked of desperation. They were trying to claw back control, but the truth was they had already lost it. Because what they didn't realize is, I wasn't just a neighbor anymore. I had become a symbol, a warning, to HOAs across the country. And Karen? She was the punchline. In racing, the crowd can turn with a single crash. In neighborhoods, all it takes is one bad Karen. Karen thought she could spin the narrative. A few days after the video went viral and my story exploded across car blogs, forums, and mainstream news outlets, she released a carefully worded statement through the HOA email list. The decision to remove the unauthorized vehicle was made in accordance with long-standing HOA standards to preserve the aesthetic, safety, and uniformity of our community. No individual is above the rules, regardless of profession. That last line was the kicker, the passive-aggressive jab meant to reinforce that she was still in charge. But what Karen failed to grasp was that this wasn't just about rules anymore. This had become about power, about arrogance, about injustice. And the residents, her so-called loyal subjects, were waking up. Within 48 hours of her email, I started receiving messages from neighbors. Quiet at first, then more direct, then angry. "Hey man, just wanted to say I think it's ridiculous what happened to your car. Total overreach. We've all been dealing with Karen for years. She tried to find my wife over garden gnomes. If you need people to show up at the next board meeting, I'm in." It was as if someone had lifted the veil. The neighborhood realized they didn't have to live under Karen's reign of pettiness and citations. They just never had a reason or a champion to push back. Until now. The kids, especially, were the real revolutionaries. One morning, a group of about 6 elementary school kids showed up on their bikes while I was cleaning my car. They stared at it with awe, eyes wide like they were at a car show. One brave boy asked, "Is that the one from YouTube?" I smiled and nodded. That turned into a line of selfies, high fives, and questions about how fast it could go. And then I had an idea. The next weekend, I hosted a neighborhood track day. Not a real track, of course, just a safe, idle display. I parked the car with the doors open, set up cones and barriers in the cul-de-sac, and let the kids hop in one at a time for photos and mock startup sequences, sound effects only, no engine noise. I even gave them mini posters with my autograph and the phrase, "Fast but fair," even on the streets. Word spread.
Fast.
Parents came. People from outside the neighborhood drove in. A local ice cream truck parked nearby. A drone flew overhead. The HOA could barely contain the buzz, and Karen? She didn't even show her face. She was losing her grip. But the backlash wasn't limited to curious families and supportive neighbors. It hit the HOA board like a wrecking ball. Emails flooded their inbox. Some polite, some very not. One excerpt read, "If you can tow a national champion's car without legal basis, what else are you doing behind closed doors?" Another, "I'll be consulting my attorney if this kind of harassment continues. Enough is enough." One longtime resident even submitted a formal petition for a recall vote against the HOA president, Karen herself. The petition needed 25% of resident signatures to force a vote. Within 3 days, it had over 60%. Karen tried to retaliate, calling for an emergency HOA meeting, but only 2 other board members showed up. One of them resigned mid-meeting, citing ethical concerns and unlawful targeting of a resident. And the press? Oh, they loved this. A local columnist dubbed her Queen Karen of the Killjoys, a monarch undone by horsepower and hubris. The headlines spread like wildfire, shared across Facebook groups, neighborhood forums, and even Reddit's r/HOA, where users roasted her so savagely, someone made a meme of her face on the front of a toy tow truck box, captioned, "Now towing dreams, one driveway at a time." And in all of this chaos, I didn't even have to raise my voice. I stayed calm, publicly composed, because I knew from racing that sometimes your opponent loses not because you hit them hard, but because they oversteer into their own downfall. Karen had weaponized rules, but I had truth, and truth had horsepower. One night, about a week into the media frenzy, I stood in my driveway under the porch light, looking out over the quiet street. A few houses down, Karen's blinds were drawn. Her porch light was off. Her yard, once perfectly trimmed and pristine, now had weeds poking up along the edge. Her poodle, which used to strut proudly beside her, hadn't been walked in days. She was hiding, not because of me, but because the neighborhood had finally seen through her illusion of control. For the first time, I felt the weight shift, not just in public opinion, but in the balance of power. I hadn't revved my engine. I just let the truth idle loud enough to be heard. In racing, revenge is taken on the last lap. In life, it's taken in court. By now, the neighborhood was fully awake. Karen's authority had withered, the board was in chaos, and I had gone from that guy with the car to a local legend with a legal plan. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Karen had made one mistake too many, and unlike her, I believed in finishing what someone else started. So I sat down with my lawyer, Samantha Lee, a tough-as-nails litigator with a talent for dismantling HOAs. She'd been watching the saga unfold in the news, and when I called, she didn't ask me if we should file. She asked, "How far do you want to take this?" I leaned back and replied, "All the way." We launched a civil lawsuit against the HOA and Karen personally. The claims were clear. Illegal towing of private property, emotional distress from targeted harassment, property damage, as the impound lot had scratched the undercarriage of the vehicle, violation of my rights as a licensed professional under state and municipal code. I wasn't just suing for the return of my car or the towing fee. I wanted precedent. I wanted every HOA that read about it to rethink weaponizing their rulebooks. I wanted to expose the rot behind Karen's clipboard facade. The lawsuit hit like a thunderclap. The HOA scrambled. Their response came back hastily written, poorly organized, and filled with weak justifications. They claimed they were just enforcing long-standing regulations. But they couldn't provide consistent proof of enforcement across the neighborhood. In fact, my legal team found 3 other residents who had similar vehicles, boats, trailers, even a restored classic Mustang, all parked visibly without issue. Not one had been cited or towed. But they weren't public figures. They weren't racing champions with a camera crew and media reach. They weren't me. We entered discovery and found the smoking gun, an internal HOA email thread that had Karen forwarding a photo of my car with the message, He's bringing down the tone of the neighborhood. I don't care how famous he is. We need to make an example." That phrase, "make an example," became the hammer that cracked her entire defense. My lawyer smiled when she read it. "That's intent," she said. "That's malice. We're going to bury them with this." The court date arrived 3 weeks later. It was small claims, but the gallery was packed. Neighbors showed up, curious. A few wore shirts that said "Justice for the GT3, a joke that became a movement. A local news crew sat quietly in the back. Karen arrived late, wearing oversized sunglasses, trying to look invisible. It didn't work. When she took the stand, her composure cracked. She was asked whether she knew who I was before authorizing the tow. Her answer? He said he was some sort of race car driver.
I didn't verify it.
It didn't matter. When my lawyer showed the email, Karen turned red. She tried to claim it was taken out of context, but the judge wasn't buying it. He leaned forward and said, "You targeted a resident based on personal bias, not consistent policy. That's unacceptable." In a ruling that made the front page of the local paper, the judge found in my favor on all counts. The HOA was ordered to pay for all towing and impound fees, cover court costs and my legal fees, pay additional damages for emotional distress and property impact, issue a formal written apology and public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, revise their vehicle policy to include provisions for professional use vehicles with valid documentation. And Karen? She was personally cited for misconduct by the board. The fallout was immediate. Within a week, she was formally removed as HOA president by unanimous vote. The petition had grown too loud, the evidence too undeniable. Her fellow board members turned on her to save themselves. Her carefully curated kingdom collapsed. One by one, the signs of her departure appeared, the for sale sign in her yard, the quiet movers arriving at dawn, the way she avoided eye contact with every neighbor as she boxed up her perfect garden gnome collection. No more poodle patrols. No more clipboard strolls. Just silence. And me? I stood on my porch as her car rolled away for the last time, and I couldn't help but think how poetic it was. She towed my car away in secret and drove away in public disgrace. A week later, the HOA issued a newsletter written by a new president, elected by popular vote, thanking me for holding the community to a higher standard of fairness and transparency. My car was back in the driveway, waxed, polished, and glistening in the sunlight. No one complained anymore. If anything, they waved. She tried to silence my engine. Now it's the anthem of the neighborhood. The war was over. And unlike the racetrack, this time the finish line wasn't marked by a checkered flag. It was marked by peace. For the first time since I moved in, my mornings were truly quiet again. No yellow violation slips. No side eyes from across the lawn. No HOA surveillance disguised as community concern. Just birds, a cool breeze, and the low, contented hum of my race car's cooling system clicking softly as the sun hit its polished hood. I didn't move the car inside the garage. Not because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't. That driveway had been the battleground. That was where Karen drew her invisible line and lost. So I left the car there, not as a trophy, but as a statement. A reminder. Freedom doesn't belong behind closed doors. Every Saturday, I still pulled out the microfiber cloth and detailed the bodywork. Every curve of that GT3 held a story now. A scratch from a close race. A bolt replaced after a crash. And now, the faintest mark left by an impound tow that cost an HOA their reputation. Funny how something meant to shame me ended up branding them. The neighborhood had changed too, in more ways than I ever expected.
People waved now.
Some honked as they passed. Others stopped by just to talk cars, ask about upcoming races, or show off photos of their own dream vehicles. The champion had become part of the community fabric. Even the new HOA president, a retired engineer named Bill, showed up one morning with a cup of coffee and said, "You know, if we hosted a car show right here, I bet it'd bring the whole place together." We did exactly that a month later. We called it the Freedom and Fuel Festival. Just a simple weekend event with music, food trucks, kids' go-karts, and a long line of neighborhood cars on display, classics, customs, even a few motorcycles. The GT3 was the centerpiece, parked at the front with a small plaque that read, "This car brought us together by almost tearing us apart." A reminder that rules should protect people, not punish them. The turnout was incredible. Even people from outside the community came in. The event raised money for local schools. It was covered by a few local blogs and even a regional magazine that titled the piece, "How a National Champion and a Neighborhood Rewrote the Rules, One Wheel at a Time." Karen, of course, was long gone. Her house sold quietly.
No goodbye party.
No farewell speech. Just a moving truck and a few pale boxes carted away like pieces of a crumbling monarchy. The new owners? A young couple with 2 kids and a love for dirt bikes. They even asked if I'd help them build a shed to store their gear. I said yes. It was strange at first, seeing her house lit with warm lights instead of cold silence. But also healing. Because what Karen never understood, what so many people like her still don't understand, is that community isn't about power, it's about respect. And when you confuse authority with righteousness, you start making decisions for people, not with them. That's why I never retaliated with vandalism, or gossip, or noise. I responded with the tools I know best: precision, persistence, and public truth. I didn't come to this neighborhood to stir up conflict. I came here for rest. But when someone tried to run over my rights, I did what I always do when pushed into a corner. I drove forward.
Hard. Fast.
Focused. And it paid off. The car that once drew complaints now gets compliments. The man they once called disruptive is now asked to speak at HOA meetings when new policy drafts are proposed. Me, the guy they tried to fine for a bad image, now leads a youth workshop every other month to teach local teens about discipline, mechanics, and racing safety. Sometimes life really does do a full 180. I don't pretend every day is perfect now. Some rules still need revisiting. There's always that one neighbor who thinks speed bumps should be taller than their fence. But the difference now is that people listen, people vote, and people speak up. They remember what silence cost them, and they remember who paid the price for standing up. And that's the real win. Not the money I won in court. Not the apology letter I keep filed away somewhere. Not even the headlines or fan comments. The real win is knowing that when someone tries to take your freedom, your identity, or your passion, you don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to stand firm and let your actions speak louder than the noise. So now, I wake up, brew a cup of strong coffee, step outside, and glance at the machine that started it all, still sitting proudly in the driveway, glistening under the morning sun. Every morning feels like a victory lap, not because I won a race, but because I refuse to lose myself. Karen towed the wrong car. And now, I get the checkered flag every morning. As the sun dipped low behind the rooftops of my once hostile neighborhood, I sat on the hood of my race car, the very one they tried to erase. What started as an act of petty control turned into a movement that changed the way my entire community saw power, pride, and principle. They thought they were dealing with just another guy with a loud car. What they got was a national champion who refused to back down. Karen tried to break me. Instead, she broke the system that enabled her. Her rules? Rewritten. Her grip?
Gone.
And her name? Just a cautionary tale whispered between HOA meetings. Now kids ride their bikes past my house and wave. Neighbors stop to ask about my next race. The same driveway once marked for punishment is now a symbol of freedom. And every time I fire up that engine, every time those pipes roar to life, it's not just horsepower echoing through the streets. It's a reminder that no one, not even an HOA Karen, can tow away who you are. This was never just about a car. It was about standing up when someone tries to silence your passion. And in the end, I didn't just win the battle. I rewrote the rules of the road.